Welcome once again, everyone, to another lesson in the New Testament is Fake series on the Alak Emed channel, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon. It is June 8th, 2021. This lesson is titled, He Was Nailed to the Cross. This reminds me of a song we sang in church when I was younger. He was nailed to the cross for me. We sang that one sometimes at Easter time, Good Friday, and so on. But I want to show here that this is just plainly wrong based on the God of the Torah. Everyone on earth who trusts in the Calvary salvation is wrong based on what the Old Testament or the Torah teaches. There is no salvation in Jesus Christ, and the New Testament is fake. I will begin with Joshua chapter 4 and verse 24 as I go on to show with some scriptures here that Jesus was not nailed to the cross for your salvation or to free you in any way from any sin or from anything. Joshua, Old Testament now, Joshua chapter 4, verse 24. So we're looking at Jesus' hands now, his hands being nailed to the cross. When the people were talking in the Old Testament about the hand of the Lord, they were talking about the power of the Lord. So when Jesus is having his hands nailed to the cross, that's just something being carried out to deceive you. The Most High said his hands are stretched out to deliver you and so on. And when he delivered Israel with his hands, it does not mean he was physically stretching his hand to deliver them. So Jesus physically stretching his hands out like that and being crucified, that's just a gimmick. So Joshua 4:24 says that all the people of the earth might know the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, that ye might fear the Lord your God forever. Now these people didn't actually see the hand of the Lord, but it says here that it is mighty, his hand is mighty, means it was a show of power. Nobody actually saw a physical hand of God being stretched out upon the earth. Means God was fighting for Israel and protecting them and so on. So to send a physical man to be stretched out on a cross after having been flogged and pierced in his head with a crown of thorns and bleeding and so on, and then stretching out his hands, to be nailed on Calvary's cross, that's not what's being shown in the scriptures when the hand of the Lord is saving people. Let's run over to the New Testament from the book of John. And we'll go to John chapter 20 and verse 25. The other disciples therefore said unto him, We have seen the Lord. But he said unto them, Except I shall see in his hands the print of the nails, and put my finger into the print of the nails, and thrust my hand into his side, I will not believe. So remember, Thomas wanted to believe that this Jesus was risen. Now look at this word for print, where it says, Except I shall see in his hands the print of the nails. So the nails driven in by the Roman soldiers printed the mark of the piercing in the hands of Jesus. But the word here, print, from the Greek G5179, probably tupos or tupos, it says it is a mark of a stroke or blow, a print. So it's leaving a mark on him. Now, people worship Jesus as God, and that's what we were taught for many years, and still some are teaching that. But this is not the hand of the Lord, and Jesus is not God, so wake up and, just get real. Because they made a print in his hand. And how is it that someone can print, or like it says here, to mark, or the mark of a stroke or blow that prints something in his hand? How can you mark or strike God, or put a blow on God, or strike God, or put a blow on God? Whenever God's hand was being used in salvation for Israel in the Old Testament, he never had his hand struck. No one could slap his hand, hit his hand, break his hand, print a blow on his hand or a mark, which means God is being wounded in the battle to save his people Israel. The New Testament is fake when it tells you that Jesus was the hand of God being struck and blown and imprinted on by the Roman soldiers in order to save you. That moves away from how the Most High used his hand to save Israel. He never suffered a mark in the Old Testament on his hand just to save Israel. The New Testament is fake. And so are the teachers and the lessons when they tell you he was nailed to the cross for me. Let's run over to still New Testament now. The book of Colossians chapter 2 and verse 14. Blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to the cross. So this Apostle Paul wants you to think that Jesus took all your transgressions, your sins, your offenses to the cross, and it was nailed to the cross when his hands were nailed unto the cross. But I just mentioned that no one could just break God's hand, pierce his hand when he was bringing salvation in the Old Testament. So this here from the Apostle Paul is just another fake teaching. New Testament again, and I'm going to get into the Old Testament shortly, but from the book of Matthew, chapter 26, for all those who want to reach understanding. Matthew 26, verse 2, Jesus speaking here, and he says, "Ye know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified." This again breaks from how the Most High brings his salvation. Who's going to betray God in order to lead him to his death in the Old Testament when he's getting ready to save Israel? No, he's giving life to Israel by saving them, so he maintains his life. No one can betray him, outsmart him, or trick him and corner him in order to hurt him or bring any harm to him, to kill him. So if you see a left hand nailed onto the cross, if you see a right hand nailed onto that cross on Golgotha's hill of sorrow, it is not the hand of the Lord, not the hand of the God of Israel. It is for a new God in a new book. And Exodus 20, verse 3, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." So this could not have been God in any form, not even in human form, stretching himself on Calvary, because the Romans had to take his hands and drive spikes into his hands. But God's hand cannot be physically seen and handled, and certainly not by the heathen Roman soldiers. But instead, the Torah teaches that the hand of the Lord brought salvation to his people Israel at different times. So the New Testament salvation with the hands of Jesus being pierced, that's something different going on. It is a trick. From the book of Psalms, chapter 17 and verse 7. Show thy marvelous loving kindness, O thou that savest by thy right hand, them which put their trust in thee, from those that rise up against them. They never saw this as a physical hand. It was a way of speaking to say that the Most High has the power to save those who put their trust in Him. That's what they meant when they said, He saves by His right hand. Anthropomorphism refers to instances where the Bible uses human physical appearance to describe God. And so these are anthropomorphic expressions running throughout the Bible. In this case, we're talking about His hand, the hand of the Lord. So when they spoke like this in the Old Testament, the Israelites were not dealing with any physical hand of an Israelite God that was being used to deliver them. The hand of the Lord to them in that time meant the power of God to deliver. It was a mighty God that they served that was delivering them through them receiving strength and smartness in battle, as well as miraculous deliverances on the battlefield, as well as it was with the armies of the Lord, basically, or even with the power of nature, like when coming out of Israel and the waters were splitting at the Red Sea and so on, according to what the book says. So this was no physical hand being seen, being manipulated, but rather spiritual power, divine power coming into play. So Jesus, having His physical hand on the left and the right of the cross, beam of the cross, He was just wasting His made-up life and suffering for no good reason, because His trickery has been found out. The salvation is not of Jesus, but of the God of the Old Testament, or the Torah. Psalm chapter 20 and verse 6. Again, showing you no physical hand when it says, Now know I that the Lord saveth His anointed. He will hear him from His holy heaven, with the saving strength of His right hand. Who says from heaven, meaning that power is coming down from heaven, or power of the Most High is being used to deliver His anointed. No one ever saw no physical hand of God being used to save them, like Jesus in the New Testament is making you think that His hand was physically pierced to save you. Psalm chapter 31 and verse 15. My times are in thy hand. Deliver me from the hand of mine enemies, and from them that persecute me. Now we see the enemies, they have hands that they will physically put upon David. And he is praying against that because he doesn't want to fall into their hands when they thrust their swords into him. But he trusts in the hand of the Most High to deliver him. Their hands might be physical, but the hand of the Most High, David was not seeing an actual hand of God. He was only imagining it, or like I said, speaking with anthropomorphism. It was an imagination of what God would do and be like if He were a man to deliver him from his enemies. But in so speaking, he would be imagining a powerful man, a powerful God. That's why he would say the hand of the Lord would deliver him. It would be a more powerful hand than all the hands of his enemies. But there was no actual physical hand that was there saving him, that belonged to God. Now the hand of God, unlike at Calvary, when they pierced Jesus with spikes, is never injured, bleeding, or held and overpowered by man, like the Roman soldiers, or held and overpowered by the heathen, the way they did at Calvary. They held Jesus and put him down there on the cross, laid him out, stretched out his hands, and they overpowered his hands and held him down there and drove spikes into him on that cross on Calvary's hill of sorrow when Jesus was nailed to the cross. The hand of God is never injured, never bleeding, but that's what happened to Jesus. Injured, bleeding, hurt, screaming, crying, in tears, and left for dead at the hands of the Roman soldiers. The real God of Israel, he's never injured in his hands or bleeding in his hands when he moves his hand anthropomorphically now to deliver Israel. So when Jesus is delivering Israel or delivering and saving sinners at Calvary and getting his hands bloody and pierced and broken, that's just a New Testament lie. The New Testament, once again, is fake. Now, the book of Isaiah, chapter 11 and verse 11, it says, "And it shall come to pass in that day, that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time," see that hand again, "to recover the remnant of his people." So the second time again to recover, because that's how he did it in the Old Testament. He moved his hand to deliver his people. Now he's going to set his hand again to deliver and recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, and so on. It goes on. So his hand is now moving to deliver as in ancient times, but the New Testament Calvary story breaks from what he did in the old times and did something new, not something again, like it says here, the hand again the second time, but it's something new, not something old that was done in the Torah, but something new done at Calvary. That was never ever done to God's hand before in the Old Testament, where someone would hold on God, stifle him and so on, and whatever they did to Jesus, and overpower his hand, kneeling on his hand or whatever, and driving spikes into God's hand to stop him from delivering his people, or to assist him in delivering his people by killing God. He says, the prophet here says, he shall set his hand again, so his hand will again move to deliver his people a second time. But Jesus, for the first time, tried a hand deliverance, but he was cut off when they drove spikes into his hand after overpowering his hand. Who can overpower the hand of the Most High in the Torah? The New Testament story is not according to the Old Testament writings. Isaiah chapter 14 and verse 27. "For the Lord of hosts hath purposed, and who shall disannul it? And his hand is stretched out, and who shall turn it back?" So he's saying in the verse before that he's stretching out his hand upon all the nations. So again, he's moving his hands to punish the nations, to break them down, and to deliver his people. So in verse 27 now, he says, who shall disannul what he's doing? What he's doing with his hand, who shall disannul it? Now, disannul, parar, H6565 from the Hebrew, it says that disannul is to break or to frustrate, to break, to violate, to make ineffectual, to be broken, to split, to crack through, to crack through. Didn't they not break and split with the spike that they nailed to Jesus, and broke and split his flesh, his hand, and cracked right through his hands? And you're telling me this is the salvation of God at Calvary, when they nailed Jesus to the cross and sing to you, he was nailed to the cross for me? The Most High said, who can disannul, who can break and crack through my hand when I lift my hand to move to deliver my people Israel by breaking down the nations? Who can break and frustrate me in the work of my hands to deliver my people, to bring salvation through my hands to my people? So when they broke Jesus down and broke his hand and broke his flesh and split through and shattered his flesh and his hand and cracked right through his hands with those Roman spikes, this was not of God. It says that word disannul means to violate. They violated the body that was supposed to be the body of righteousness, Jesus. But obviously we know it was not. It was the body of sin and transgression against the Most High's commandments, His Torah. To have a man die that people would worship as God and call that the salvation of God. They frustrated the disannul, frustrate and make ineffectual. They frustrated the work of Jesus' hands to deliver people and made ineffectual the work of His hands, because they killed His whole body and killed even His hands and took the life out of His very hand as they drove spikes into that hand and made His hand ineffectual and frustrated so that He could not reach and do anything. He was laying there dead. His hand was made ineffectual and frustrated on the cross when He could not have the power of His hand anymore to move and do anything on the cross, because it was held in place by spikes. Spikes. The New Testament is fake. The New Testament is fake. This is the Yalak Emet channel, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon. Let's carry on. Isaiah chapter 36 and verse 6. Lots of scriptures for you here today, just to break down this Jesus and New Testament some more. Everyone who's trusting in Jesus, they are trusting in lies. Isaiah 36 verse 6. Lo, thou trustest in the staff of this broken reed on Egypt, whereon if a man lean, it will go into his hand and pierce it. So is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all that trust in him. So, right here, I threw this in because, again, the Most High is showing here that if hands are pierced, it is not His hands, but it is the hand of someone who is weak and don't have the power to save, like the Pharaoh. He's saying, the Pharaoh is nothing for me, the God of Israel. It's like you're trusting in the Pharaoh. So is the Pharaoh, right? So if the hand is broken like it was broken at Calvary, it is not of the God of the Torah. Showing here again now that the hand of the Lord that they knew in the Old Testament was not a physical hand like Jesus spread out on Calvary to be pierced and broken and be crippled with nails so that He could not save the Israelites back then, which is why the AD 70 they ended up killing more of the Israelites and they had to flee and take off. But the hand of the Lord is actually just showing the divine power of God to deliver His people. As in Isaiah 41 verse 13, for I the Lord thy God will hold thy right hand, saying unto thee, fear not, I will help thee. So if He's holding their right hand, it's because He's got the power to hold them up and bring them to safety. Isaiah 45 verse 9, and this is just a real rebuke to Jesus and the teachers and followers who refuse to repent. Who refuse to repent, as well as the apostles in the New Testament. Isaiah 45:9, woe unto him that striveth with his Maker. Let the potsherd strive with the potsherds of the earth. Shall the clay say to him that fashioneth it, what makest thou? Or thy work, he hath no hands. So he's saying the potsherds, they're on the level of the other potsherds of the earth. You're not on the level of the one that's making it, on the level of the Creator. You are just the clay. Shall the clay say to the one that has the power and have the life that fashions it, what makest thou? What are you doing? What's your work about? And cursing the Maker, saying he hath no hands. If you look at this verse long enough, you will understand that the Maker is supposed to have hands, but the Most High is also saying something about Himself. Isaiah is saying something about the Most High here as well. Is that your God should never be without hands. Your God should never be without hands. So how come Jesus at some point lost His hands even for 3 days and 3 nights? Till a man Thomas, doubting Thomas they call him, wanted to thrust his hand inside and touch hands and see the prints and so on, to verify that his God now still has hands once again. To verify that, yeah, it is him. First of all, you're not going to test the Most High's hand like that, because that's not going to happen to him. But also, God, the God of Israel, should never be without his hands at any point. But Jesus lost his on Calvary, under punishment by the Romans. Isaiah 59 and verse 1. Behold, the Lord's hand is not shortened that it cannot save, neither his ear heavy that it cannot hear. Now, two things here. I was looking at the word heavy, but then I just saw the word shortened. So the Lord's hand is not shortened that it cannot save. That's exactly what happened to Jesus, though, unlike the God of the Old Testament when he was able to save his people. The Lord's hand is not shortened, but Jesus' hand was shortened. H7114, Chatzar, it says to be short, be impatient, to be vexed, be grieved. And that's what happened to Jesus and his hand. His hand was vexed. It couldn't do anything on Calvary because it was restricted by nails. But it goes on to say it's a primitive route to dock off, to curtail, especially to harvest. So now, like when you're cutting grass or cutting grain and so on, you harvest, you're cutting down. It says to cut down, much discouraged and so on. So to cut down. So what he's saying now is, behold, the Lord's hand is not cut down. It is not pierced, as in the piercing of nails at Calvary. That is not the Lord's hand at Calvary. So salvation does not come out of Jesus' work at Calvary. The Lord's hand is not damaged at any point. Not even for 3 days and 3 nights. So that it cannot save. No wonder they said, he saved others, that thief, but he cannot save himself. But he cannot save himself. Or whoever said it. But it goes on, neither his ear heavy that it cannot hear. Look at his ear. Not even that is heavy that it cannot hear. Could Jesus still hear you on Calvary after he died? Sure, he heard the people at first and his mother there and so on. But eventually he stopped hearing. Why? Because he died. His ear would have become dull, heavy as he was slipping away from life. That's how it is when people are dying. All the senses begin to shut down. Neither his ear heavy that it cannot hear. So his ear became heavy as the life was slipping out of him. He could no longer hear, just like he could no longer feel. He could no longer move his hand, losing the sensations in his hand as the nail, the wound in his hand, drained out the blood out of his hand, out of his whole body anyway. So he became dull. His ear became dull, heavy, insensible. So the sense of hearing went away on the cross as he died. But the Bible here is saying, the Torah is saying, neither is the ear of God heavy or dull or losing its hearing so that it cannot hear. Not even for 3 days and 3 nights will the God of the Torah give up his hearing or lose his hearing while trying to save his people. But it happened to Jesus. The New Testament is fake. The New Testament is fake. One last verse here now from the book of Psalms. Psalm chapter 37 and verse 32 and verse 33. The wicked watcheth the righteous and seeketh to slay him, just like they did with Jesus. The Lord will not leave him in his hand, just like their hands grabbed Jesus and whipped him, bruised him, and put his hand on the cross and nailed it up. So their hands were left free to do all those things and go home and use their hand to hug their families and eat their dinner and so on. But his hand was left incapacitated, can't work, can't do anything, can't move himself off the cross. The Lord will not leave him in his hand. The Lord will not leave him in his hand, nor condemn him when he is judged. But Jesus was condemned to death on Calvary like a common thief. It says, the wicked watcheth the righteous to seek and slay him, but the Lord will not leave him to his plan, to his wicked plan, the plan of the wicked. But that's exactly what happened to Jesus. Remember in the Garden of Gethsemane? Because they were scoping out and watching Jesus and so on. And the Roman government and the soldiers, they were watching Jesus. Just like it says here, the wicked watcheth the righteous. They were watching Jesus and knew even his schedule and knew when to come and arrest him in that Garden of Gethsemane. And they watched him and even set up a plan with Judas to take him down and arrest him, to slay him. They set up a nice schedule with Judas to seek and to slay Jesus. But the Bible here says that the Lord will not leave him in his hand nor condemn him. But they teach you Jesus was condemned to die. And they teach you Jesus was allowed to go into the hand of the wicked. Even though the Torah here says that the Lord will not leave him in his hand. The New Testament is fake. He was nailed to the cross for me is just a time-wasting doctrine and song and teaching and time-wasting use of the scriptures. Because somebody gave you a new book when the Moses says in Deuteronomy 4:2, do not add anything else to what I command you. You just heard another lesson in the New Testament is Fake series. Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, he was nailed to the cross for me is another New Testament lie. Read the Bible for yourself and stop letting others read it for you.